still not 4 miles an hour.
No, it was. It was wonderful weather. It was in October, so I mean, it was that was the last of the tour season. So.
Patrick came. Yeah, nice to meet you. The zoo.
Yeah,
and know so much about you. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Pollinations and that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. Good to meet you. Yeah.
So I'm your chair for today's workshop session, which means that I'm basically going to be the master timekeeper and the person who drags people onto this stage, because we've got quite an action-packed agenda for today. We've got over 100 slides that will be distributed over this agenda. Let me first start off by introducing some of the speakers for this afternoon in the first half of this session, namely Bob Hammer on the far side, Lee Deju, and Peter Kevin, and Peter Hollingsworth. So these are our main speakers and architects of this workshop session. What we're going to do then is, by the way, give you an overview of the running order, because this was a work in progress until about 55 minutes ago when we sat down for lunch and said enough. But we didn't publish this in advance because we were developing it as time was going on. But what we want to do is first start off and just make a few remarks about what the impetus is for this particular workshop. That sets the stage for Deju to talk a little bit about what happened a couple years ago with the development of the Kunming declaration that put us on this track to thinking about how to set up an international society and really is the impetus for this particular workshop. Then we're going to turn the floor over to Peter Kevin to hear a little bit about the way that the International Union of Biological Sciences is set up and functions, just so you get a bit of an insight about how large international organizations focused on biological sciences can work. It's not necessarily the model for DNA Barcode, but it is a model to get into the back of your minds to think about some of the pertinent issues that we'll be facing as we go into our discussion about options for governance of this society. In the last section, before we have a coffee break at 3:30, we will hear from Norway, the Netherlands, and Mexico some national network updates, partly because it's just a good venue for us to hear about activities that are being going on in other jurisdictions. But these are updates that are being presented to sort of say, well, look, there's a lot of activity that happens in other places around the world. Let's actually hear then what that activity looks like and get that also present in our minds, so that we can then think about how would a society appropriately respond to the needs of these national networks and regional networks around the world. We'll have coffee, water, whatever you want at 3:30 until 4 o'clock. And then we'll turn the floor over to Pete, and Pete will walk us through some of the considerations for governance of an international society for Barcode. We'll intersect that conversation with two quick presentations, one from Michelle Enderheim from South Africa, talking about the potential for having the next international meeting in South Africa, and then a similar sort of presentation from Pablo from Argentina in light of thinking even further ahead to 2019 for the 8th International Meeting in Argentina. In the very last section of today's workshop, what we want to do then is reflect the conversation back to you in the form of a set of draft resolutions that we might consider for the plenary session that happens on Friday, so that if this workshop is actually productive and fruitful, that we end up generating some clear direction of travel for where we think we should go in terms of developing this society. It would be useful then to take that back to the plenary, have some resolutions there for the body of this conference to vote upon, and then we can actually take some actions to really bedding down this society and making sure that it comes to fruition. So that's the running order. So our high-level objectives then is to provide information on progress to date on the international society since Kunming. The second is to provide and create a space for us to consider different governance models like IUBS and like regional needs and activities. So that's our second major objective. We need to collect advice on the structure of the society and how it ought to be governed. And then we drafted 4 resolutions that could be taken to the plenary on Friday, and those are up for discussion here as well. But they will embrace, I think, fairly traditional things that you would expect in the development of society, thinking about how you actually compose an interim governance council, where you would locate a secretariat, how you would support that secretariat. If you're developing working groups, then what would they be, and how do you establish leaders of those working groups, and then a discussion about the location of the 7th conference so that we still have momentum going into the future for these kinds of meetings. So that is the overview, and I think I'll turn the floor now over to Bob to come up and say a few words about the impetus for the workshop from his perspective. So over to you, Bob.
Thank you, David. And thank you all for coming out to this workshop. Welcome to the University of Guelph, and for many of you, if it's your first time here, welcome to Canada. We're delighted to have you. In thinking about a shift to... That was a shift. Did I do that? It wasn't intentional if I did. In thinking a bit about the evolution of DNA barcoding, I put together this little wordle that just represents some of my own involvement in different meetings, workshops, campaigns, international projects, and consortia. What we've seen since the original publication by Paul Hébert promoting DNA barcoding is an explosion of activity in different taxonomic groups, in different geographic regions, different levels from basic science to its application. And it's really been exciting, but what it's also shown us is that each of these projects as they started tended to have set objectives, time bounds, funding, and they all kind of come and go. And our community needs a more cohesive governance model to perpetuate our activities. So that's really what led us to where we are today, to establish this International Society for a Barcode of Life, because we do now represent a mature scientific community of practice dedicated to building a DNA-based registry of eukaryotic life using barcodes. Now this impetus, as the Wordle was trying to portray, derives from the integration of experiences and perspectives of those who participated in the myriad campaigns, conferences, consortia, networks, projects, training programs, and working groups that have emerged since barcoding was first proposed. Its raison d'etre is to coordinate the completion of this registry of life on Earth, to facilitate the development of barcoding applications and the technology developments that are sure to come, and communicate with stakeholders at all levels. How we achieve this objective is the purpose of this meeting today. So going back for a second to the Wordle, the one thing that all of these had in common, the different workshops and projects, is people. People are what drive the barcoding effort forward. Nations have catalyzed it through funding, but it's at its roots people like yourselves who are doing the work and driving this forward. And that's why we feel it's time for a professional society of democratically elected representatives to continue to guide the future of our movement. So with that, I'll hand it over to Deju to briefly talk about the Kunming Declaration, where we were at the last conference and why we began to call for the formation of this society with this conference.
Thank you, Bob. It's really nice to be back again. And I will just give you a few pictures and words about to remind you what we have achieved in Kunming. And this is the opening and the closing ceremony in Kunming. And here we can see the formal declaration. I will give you some more details afterwards, and it's signed by the couple of us here. And so we recognize the following 5 points in Kunming. Firstly, the rapid expansion and diffusion of barcoding. Secondly, is the great potential for both scientific and socio-economic impacts of barcoding. Thirdly, the growth of international community of applications. And fourthly, the need to sustain a certain function provided by to date by both CIBO and AIBO. And finally, the requirement for best practices in governance for the barcoding community. So the declaration and the process, including the declaration that progress towards this goal achieved by creating an ad hoc governance committee, which is here today, and establishing a governance structure, and to consult and report back to this conference here in Guelph. And the purpose of this society, I will also going to remind you line by line. So firstly is excellency in society in the sense of barcoding and of all domains of life. So animals, plants, microorganisms, marine life. And secondly, technology development to maximize the power and the efficiency of barcoding techniques. I mean, think about the next generation sequencing. We had a workshop this morning. And thirdly, development of and adaptation of barcoding application to meet social challenges through a variety of mechanisms, including non-profit and including also commercial activities. And fourthly, development of a reference library, as we already did. I mean, Sujivan will give you more details in planet speaking about board and associated stands, including A, technical standards for barcoding markers, B, interoperability standards, actually informatics, C, regulatory standards using barcoding. Fifthly, accessibility of barcoding data, techniques and publications, recognizing constraints on the use of genetic resources in compliance with international and national laws on access and benefit sharing. Actually, this is Nagoya Protocol on ABS of genetic resources. So 6 is engagement of other partners, including national governments, which is really important because this everything cannot be done without the governmental support, and the intergovernmental agencies, private sectors, and non-governmental organizations. So it should be a wide representative from the societies. And the expansion of the global barcoding community and the international cooperation with particular attention to the developing world. That's because the biodiversity-rich countries are mostly developing countries. So finally, it's development and delivery of training programs to build global capacity in the developing countries, and integrate barcoding into all levels and the types of education, from primary to secondary to, and even to the college education. And I think that's the major thing I would like to remind you about the Kunming Declaration. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that review, Daeju. The Kunming Declaration, of course, was a wonderful achievement and milestone in the development of the barcoding community. But I think also what's really important about the development of that declaration is that we got to the declaration by having started a conversation about what the next steps would be for the barcoding community internationally. And the Kunming Declaration, I think, as Daeju pointed out in his review of the articles of it, really points out to the acknowledged strengths of barcoding, the tremendous international effort that's gone behind it, and importantly, the will to continue on. And I really think that that's what was so useful about those conversations that we had, and you were such a wonderful host in China for that conference, so thank you for that as well. So as I said before, I'd like to now invite Peter to come and talk to us a little bit about the IUBS so that we can think about it as some of the parameters of the IUBS and their relevance to thinking about a society for barcoding. So the floor is yours, Peter.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm really pinch hitting for Niels Stenstedt, who you may know was recently elected to the Academy of Sciences of the United States and is the president of the Norwegian Academy of Sciences, the Royal Norwegian Academy of Sciences. He has other obligations talking to government ministers in Norway at the moment. And it's been a great pleasure to work with Niels on the International Union of Biological Sciences. I was elected as a member of the executive committee some years ago, and I'm the membership committee, or one of the members of the membership committee for that. The reason I was elected on the executive committee of the IUBS was because I'm the president of the International Commission for Plant Pollinator Relations, and that is a scientific member of the International Union of Biological Sciences. So this gives you sort of why I can wear a couple of hats here. So what is the IUBS? The IUBS was established a long time ago, 1919. It had its ups and downs, of course. It sort of didn't function very well during the Second World War and was in abeyance at that time. It is the lead organization within the biological sciences cluster of 12 international unions of the International Council of Science, then ICSU, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, and it sort of raises its head in the news from time to time over a lot of important issues in science and in society. So ICSU, just to sort of give you a bit of a refreshment on that, is a non-governmental organization. It has global membership of national scientific bodies, about 122 members representing 142 countries. And the international scientific unions, 31, including IUBS, are members of ICSU. So ICSU's mission is to strengthen international science to the benefit of society, which is what I'm hearing from the International Barcode of Life as well in its particular discipline. It mobilizes knowledge and resources of the international science community to identify and address major issues. And certainly global climate change has been one of the things which has been very important. Before that was the ozone, the depletion of the ozone and the hole in the ozone layer, that sort of thing. And so it's very much involved in those international aspects of things. It facilitates interactions among scientists across all disciplines and from all countries. It promotes the participation of scientists, regardless of race, citizenship, language, political stance, or gender, in the international scientific endeavor and brings people together to talk about these sorts of things and provides independent and authoritative advice to stimulate constructive dialogue between the scientific community and governments, civil society, and the private sector. And the IUBS has injected itself into that process in no uncertain terms since Nils has taken over the presidency of the IUBS. So the IUBS is very much a leader in that, and as I said, there is also a non-governmental, not-for-profit organization. Its objectives, again, very similar to the objectives of ICSU, then to promote the study of biological sciences, to initiate and facilitate and coordinate research and other scientific activities necessitating international and interdisciplinary cooperation. So again, very much along the same lines as we see the International Barcode of Life has been already contributing to world science, and to ensure the discussion and dissemination of the results of cooperative research, which we already heard about from China, and we will be hearing about at these meetings here, particularly in connection with the IUBS scientific programs, and to support the organization of international conferences and to assist in the publication of their reports. And the IUBS has done that quite extensively. Well, as I mentioned, within the ICSU BioCluster, there are 12 scientific unions. They range from food science to brain research. I did not have fish for lunch, but I sort of might indicate a connection there, certainly with other things, and also the toxicologists, pure and applied biophysics, all sorts of international unions. And you will see that there isn't really a union there which addresses the issues of genetic diversity and genomics. But that has been certainly part of the IUBS's general mandate, is to consider those issues. In 2013, under Nils' direction and initiative, the first inter-union meeting was held through the Physiologists International Union, then in Great Britain. And the result was that the bio-unions, 7 bio-unions were actually present at that. And it was decided that IUBS would take on the lead coordinating role there, and Nils is the coordinator of that. The IUBS is made up of national members. There are 30 countries enrolled in IUBS, and we're trying to get more countries involved. There are 2 categories of national membership: paying members and then associate members. And for some of the developing countries, the associate membership doesn't cost anything, but it does mean that they have a role to play in governance. Last year at the meetings in Suzhou in China, Mongolia was invited to have its application for membership accepted, and that has gone ahead. There are 80 scientific international associations and societies representing biological disciplines really across the world, and that will perhaps expand after these meetings. So the IUBS next 32nd General Assembly will take place this year in Germany from the 14th to 16th of December in one of my favorite places, and that is the Botanical Gardens in Dahlem in Berlin. And the theme of the meetings will be Frontiers in Unified Biology, which is the new sort of approach that the IUBS is taking to its leadership role within the BioCluster. The IUBS Secretariat, if anybody wants to get in touch with them, is in Paris, and our Executive Director, Nathalie Fomproy, is she's relatively new. She's been with us about 3 or 4 years and has turned out to be a dynamo of activity and able to really answer any sorts of questions one might have of a nitty-gritty nature in how the IUBS functions. So how does the IUBS and the Barcode of Life come together? I think the traditions of the IUBS are certainly right in line with the sorts of things that are important to barcoding. The IUBS initiated Diversitas. Diversitas went its own separate way. It became large enough that it needed to progress on its own. And it started in 1991 and is officially over now. But nonetheless, Diversitas has had a profound influence on bringing people together who are interested in biological diversity, genomics, and of course, barcoding. So long-term interests in genomics within the IUBS, and long-term interest in influences in biodiversity, bioinformatics, systematics, taxonomy, and biological nomenclature. So we do a great deal of different things. As I mentioned, the IUBS vision and mission for the future then is interdisciplinary unified biology. And that's what we want to bring together within the biocluster of ICSU, and also, of course, with people interested in barcoding. We can facilitate and coordinate research, which is sort of goes outside the realm of the particular unions in place because of its leadership role in the biocluster, and can deal with discussions and dissemination of information, international conferences and publications of reports, as I already mentioned. So clearly there are very many common interests and common goals between what IUBS has to offer the International Barcode of Life and what the International Barcode of Life can contribute then to the health and interdisciplinarity of the international union. So lots of opportunities for collaborations and mutual assistance. So I think through unified biology, the IUBS has promoted and promotes incorporating biodiversity, genomics, evolution, and ecology for all of biology. The IUBS, and I am assured of this from Niels, because I've been in relatively close contact with him while preparing this PowerPoint, which he has approved and told me that he thinks it hits the nail on the head. I'm glad of that. So the IUBS would welcome the International Barcode of Life as a scientific member, and the application is relatively simple. There are no fees, and the opportunity is there for people from the International Barcode of Life to contribute to the governance and the advancement of the International Union of Biological Sciences. So that's my message from Niels. And I'm looking forward to how the debate unfolds, and I'm here to provide any information I possibly can on how some of these international organizations work and how they're put together. I'd be more than happy to share my experience from the International Commission on Plant Pollinator Biology, Plant Pollinator Relations, I should say, and of course my experience with the International Union. And of course, my experience with a bit of barcoding, because very, very early on, Paul and I were talking about that long before 2003. We were nattering about that when we were teaching together in Churchill, and we had a lot of discussions about barcoding, and I could immediately see the value of it. I'm not a barcoder. I have published several papers in barcoding, but only as a sort of a junior author. So I come to it as an ecologist, more so than as somebody who has got their prime interests in biodiversity and barcoding. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much.
By all means, yes.
We have a few minutes before we start the national network updates. If anybody has a question or two for Peter about what he's just said and about the potential for inclusion or room made for barcoding within the IUBS. Paul.
Peter, I saw a slightly embarrassing blank space over Canada.
Canada is not a member of the IUBS. It used to be a member of the IUBS, and the representative organization in Canada for the IUBS was NRC. So the National Research Council, we know that the flavor of the National Research Council has changed dramatically since those days, and it would no longer be an appropriate organization to represent Canada on the IUBS. To my mind, the most appropriate organization would be the Royal Society of Canada. I'm a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, as are you, Paul, but unfortunately I'm not able to make very much in the way of inroads there. I have talked to the president of ICSU, who is just down the road, then at Western University about that situation, and he too is sympathetic. It is difficult. It's like trying to herd cats. There are so many different interests within the biological sciences that we really can't find an umbrella organization that would look after Canadian biological sciences, and the Royal Society represents basically everything from fine arts right the way through to astrophysics. So it has a reluctance to take on that responsibility. So that sort of states where Canada stands at the moment. I'm still working away and trying to sort of erode the naysayers into doing something. And I have met with NRC on this, but as I say, NRC has changed its colors quite dramatically, really within the last 3 years, as well as a slow change leading up to the last 3 years. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, that's very helpful. Can you also place IUBS in the context of some of the other parallel organizations for other sciences? Because one of the things, if one takes a look at math, or astronomy, and physics, these are powerhouses that coordinate massive numbers of meetings each year. And as usual, biology is on the margins, it seems. Is that a fair assessment, or am I wrong?
That has been a fair assessment. And that's one that NILS has been trying to address, and that we on the Executive Committee of the International Union have been trying to address. Again, we have the 12 international unions within the biological sciences, and it's been sometimes difficult to get them to agree. The fact that we were able to get them to agree in 2013 that IUBS would be the lead organization for the cluster was a tremendous breakthrough. I think there's a new international and interdisciplinary within biology an acknowledgement of the need for collaborations and working together, rather than sort of saying, oh, well, my kind of biology is more important than your kind of biology. And this is, I think, is what we're striving for. I think this is going to be, now I'm putting words in Nils' mouth at the moment, because his term as president of the IUBS ends in Berlin late this year. And I'm anticipating that he, as past president, will continue to wield that sort of influence in bringing the biological sciences together under the umbrella of the IUBS. Does that?
Tremendous. I mean, it's a wonderful ambition. Hope you succeed.
Well, he's got a very good executive committee, and they're very powerful scientists from various countries represented on the executive committee, and we generally all agree that we need to do the same sorts of things. So there's no sort of debate that this needs to be done. It's just a matter of how to do it. So I suspect in Berlin there'll be a lot of consideration for that, and of course everybody here, the General Assembly is open to everybody to go to Berlin and listen. And as I say, it's one of my favorite places. Has a monument to Christian Conrad Sprengel, who was really the father of pollination biology and wrote a textbook on that in 1793. So that's, and there's a monument there to him. So I have to go and bow down before that. So.
Okay, great. So thanks again, Peter. I think that takes us to time. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Okay, now we will turn our attention to some national node updates, and I believe that we are going to start first of all with Norway's Norway. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, Torbjørn Ekrem couldn't arrive until tomorrow, but it's an honor for me to give this presentation for you. So, Norwegian Barcode of Life is a regional node in IBOL. And IBOL has been very important for us, especially in the phase of establishment, because without having a big international organization, I don't think we would have obtained neither the support at our different institutions and definitely not the big national funding which we now have for our projects. So NORBOL consists of 16 institutions, and we have all signed a formal agreement. So all directors have been involved in the process, and that makes it much easier for the individual scientists to find support for their work in their institutions. The goal is to barcode 20,000 species, on average 5 specimens per species, so around 100,000 barcodes before the end of 2018. And of course, the main focus is Norwegian biodiversity, but Norway has always had great interest in research in Arctic and Antarctic areas, and we are happy to barcode as many as possible specimens from both these regions, independent of whether the voucher is deposited in Norway or abroad. We have a formal collaboration with the Norwegian Biodiversity Information Center, and we are funded by the Norwegian Research Council and Norwegian Taxonomy Initiative. So our budget is about 100 million Norwegian kroner. About 30 million of this is fresh funding, and the other part is internal reallocation, especially from the national natural history museums. And most of our samples go through Canada, and we have a staff of 1 coordinator in 60% position. We have 4 barcode manager. In Norway, we have 4 national history museums. So each of these has 1 person 100% working on barcodes. And then we have a NORBOL contact in each of the institutions in addition to the coordinator, and 10 to 20 scientists, 5 to 10 technicians, additional technicians involved in the barcoding. This might not sound very much in terms of number of people, but remember we are a nation of 5.5 million. So in terms of proportion of our biologists, I think it's actually quite big. We have annual national workshops where people can come and get training on how to work on barcodes. We have so far barcoded almost 50,000 specimens of more than 8,000 species. So that's quite well for our goal of 200,000 barcodes of 20,000 species. More recently, we start collaboration with the Swedish Barcode of Life initiatives on marine invertebrates and 2 different groups of insects. And we will have our first national symposium arranged in November this year. And when it comes to which species we have barcoded, the vast majority is insects. And that's very much due to our participation in the Global Malaise program. So from one garden, actually the garden of Torbjørn Ekrem in Trondheim, so at 63 degrees north, he sorted out 28,000 specimens from a malaise trap, giving 25,000 barcodes of around 1,500 species, almost 3,000 bins. And while this seems to be representative for a biodiversity at a site this far north. For vascular plants, many of you might know that for vascular plants, the standard barcodes have some limitation based on the resolution, and also when you want to do environmental barcoding, so especially ancient DNA. So we are now testing out low cover shotgun sequencing of genomic DNA, which will give us the whole plus the DNA, the complete nuclear DNA, and large parts of the mitochondrial genome. The costs are about 6 times as high as just sequencing 2 standard barcodes based on the agreements we have per today. So we will have to sacrifice the number of specimens per species down to 1. But we are collaborating with the University Joseph Frier in Grenoble, and they are doing the complete flora of the Alps. And you can hear more about that by presentation of Erik Kosak here at the conference on Wednesday, I think. They do it on freshly collected silica dried material, which has high quality DNA. We don't have access to that for the complete Norwegian flora. So we're testing out protocols for herbarium material. And we will now have a PhD position in Tromsø, which is announced with deadline 15th of September. So please send your best PhD candidates, and we will have this work done. We also have a national search system. So it's feed in from, well, we got help from here to make this XML feed from BOLD, where we can then search up specimens from Norway and get information for where they have been collected, how many specimens exist in total. So anything delivered through Norwegian BOLD projects. In Norway, there are the different projects that use the barcodes. For plant metabarcoding, we use quite a lot on both ancient DNA, ancient samples, so lake sediments and permafrost samples. But it's also used for studies of diet. There is one big project on environmental barcoding of aquatic invertebrates. And of course, there's a lot of focus on taxonomy and evolution. But also more applied work like on birds' rights, food, fauna crime. Last, I would like to invite you all to Trondheim in November for our first national conference. It will be all in English, and we have some very nice guests coming to give presentations. So please visit our website and register for this conference. And I would like to thank all our partners, and I thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much, Ingrid. Any quick questions? Yeah, David.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation and update. I think it's very useful to know from the 3 national networks that are going to present what a potential international society could do to help. And you mentioned one thing, and that was, just briefly, tangentially, having an international association to which your national network could be associated. I'm interpreting here, it sounded like it gave extra credibility in getting national funding, that if it was part of something larger that had gravitas. Can you think of other things that your network would like an international body to do for you?
Well, I would just strengthen the thing with national fundings, because we actually got funding through the infrastructure program of the National Research Council, saying that, well, Norway lacks this research and community facilities. So that was that was a very major thing.
Canada had one, you should have one too.
Yes. But also I could imagine that all the practicalities, like now updating it to new method, new standards, training of staff and students.
Sharing knowledge internationally.
Yes. Yes. Mm.
Okay. Right. Thanks so much. I think next, Kevin, introduce what's happening in the Netherlands. Over to you.
Thanks for having me. So I want to give a short update about the Dutch barcoding program, which unfortunately the main program ended earlier this year. So the Dutch barcoding program was funded by the Fonds Economische Structuurversterking, which is paid by the natural gas reserves from Holland The barcoding money was divided for two institutions. CBS does barcoding of fungal cultures, and Naturalis Biodiversity Center did everything else, plants, animals, the likes. So the money we received in Naturalis was mainly for setting up high throughput molecular laboratories and also to barcode 27,000 specimens. In addition to that, a huge sum of money went into the digitalization of the museum collection, which entails roughly 30 million records on storage unit level and 8 million records on object level. As I said, our funding stopped earlier this year. It ended July 1st. But I just want to show you what we did with the money we received. The position of Holland in the IBOL network is that we're a national node within the EU central node. Holland consists of two institutes, CBS and Naturalis. The goals of the Netherlands was to create a platform for its potential users. So not just barcoding facilities, but also forensic institutes and people that want to use barcoding in their daily life, but also to engage the amateur taxonomist community. Within Naturalis, well, we have a large research collection at our disposal. However, research collections usually tend to have specimens in them that are older and DNA is difficult to obtain. So for the research collection, we mainly focused on recent expeditions in the last decade. For the fresh collected material, we engaged our amateur professionals. These are amateur taxonomists that love their work. They're engaged with Naturalis, doing field work, collecting data, and for this program we also asked them to collect specimens. So the focus is mainly on Dutch flora and fauna, and our idea was to get 3 to 5 identified samples per species. The identified part is important because we wanted to contribute to the reference barcode library with correctly identified samples to increase its power. So the coordination of the amateur taxonomist was done by an organization that covers a lot of different organizations, ranging from people that watch birds to plant specialists. To set up the collection of the specimens, we provided collection guidelines, sampling guidelines, materials, but also money. We paid the collectors per specimen, or we paid for or compensated for their field work trips. So they sort of had an extra motivation to collect as many species as possible for us to use in the barcoding program. We also provided insight into what was collected. So this is an example, it's in Dutch, an example of the Dutch species register website, where for each species that has been collected, there's a little bit of information about who collected it, where it was collected, and when it was collected, so that people can see how the DNA barcoding is involved in the daily life of these people who collect a lot of material for us, and also to see where sort of the gaps are and what still needs to be collected. Even further, for the plant barcoding, the organization behind plant specialists set up a special website where people could actually reserve species so that we didn't get 20 specimens of the same species, but we limited sort of to 3 specimens per species. So people could reserve a species. That's a species that I want to collect, print out the label, stick it with the specimen, mail it to Naturalis, and we can do the DNA work on it. So with these amateur taxonomists, we were able to cover pretty much the whole of the Netherlands for both insects and plants. So I think we have quite a nice representative data set now for Holland. So original goal was to do 27,000 specimens. The current total is a bit over 50,000. So people were a bit too enthusiastic with sending in their specimens, but up until now we've been able to handle it. And if we look into the composition of the material, we see that there's a few groups that sort of jump out. For the freshly collected Dutch material, the beetle and the flies, these groups are pretty huge. We've done, I think, roughly 3,500 specimens of each. When we look into the non-Dutch invertebrates, we can see that the Lepidoptera and the Odonet groups are quite large, and that's mainly due to Naturalis having an extensive recent collection of these species. So both the Lepidoptera and the dragonflies, they account for 20% of the total. So 10,000 Lepidoptera and 10,000 dragonflies. Just a short selection of a few of the projects we've run in the last couple of years. So as I said, 10,000 specimens of Lepidoptera, recent collections, 10,000 specimens of dragonflies from all over the world. And then for our Dutch projects, we have nearly 4,000 flies, 3,500 beetles, 6,000 plants and mosses. We nearly covered the entire Dutch flora. And just as an example for a recent expedition, we have the Kinabalu expedition of 2 years ago that netted almost 3,000 specimens that we barcoded. So all the material that we collected has been digitalized. We've pictures of everything, digital information, so it's all linked now into the publicly available bioportal. As I said before, Naturalis collection has been digitalized, and a lot of data is available through the public data portal. So we've linked all the collection objects through this tool, and we're now also setting up links to the BOL website so that people can connect the collection information to the BOL information. As I mentioned before, the Kinabalu expedition has been published last week in Nature, so everyone who is interested in reading it, it's available online as we speak. Will be published in the paper version of Nature this week. Since we now have our molecular facilities, we're not going to stop doing barcoding. So we've set up a few smaller projects to continue doing barcoding work, and one of that is the water scan project, in which we will focus on Dutch freshwater macrofauna, mainly the indicator species for freshwater quality. And we're setting up a sort of a gap analysis, not in the sense of a barcoding gap analysis, but more of a species gap analysis to see where the areas are that we need to collect more specimens. And we're using that same volunteer network to collect these specimens. And at the same time, we're looking at meta barcoding a bit more and also environmental DNA to be able to set up some water monitoring system. In addition to that, we're looking as well to our overseas territories in the Dutch Caribbeans. There's been a recent expedition, a marine expedition to St. Eustatius, and they collected over 1,600 specimens. And in October, we're going to follow that up with a terrestrial expedition. So we're not done yet, although the main barcoding project has ended. So that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I can anticipate David's going to say, so what would an international society for barcoding of life do for you in the Netherlands?
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, it's a bit similar to what Inger has said, that being attached to an international network sort of gives the whole project a bit more weight. We're contributing directly to BOLT, so to the international standard, and that's sort of why we got the money in the first place, because the natural gas reserve money is usually reserved for infrastructure, so roads and railroads, but since we were contributing to knowledge infrastructure, we were able to get that money. So that's sort of how that fits in.
Okay. Any other questions or follow-up? All right, thanks very much. Thanks, appreciate that. All right, last in the country updates, Manuel, tell us about the Mexican scene. Over to you.
Well, I will try to give you an update about the 10 years of DNA barcoding. We started exactly here in Guelph about 10 years ago with this work. And I'm speaking also with Virginia Leon Regañón, that actually she is in charge of the MexBol network in Mexico in front of the National Council of Science. Firstly, I'm going to show you a little bit about the problem that we are facing. Mexico is the 14th place in the world in size, but it has the 4th place in the richest biota in the world. The two main biogeographic regions, the Nearctics and the Neotropics of the Americas, meets in Mexico. And this, together with a completely complex topography, makes this country with a very, very rich population of biodiversity. We have from evergreen forest, tropical, to very, very dry deserts here, passing by all kinds of biomas and environments. So we have all kinds of diversity in this very complex structure. As you can see, now we recognize this in Mexico as the natural capital, and it's comparable to the classical capitals. This means financial infrastructure, etc. And we are working on that right now with the politicians to make a recognition of the importance of the biodiversity here. And also, we are very concerned about the threatened, I'm sorry about this, is in Spanish, but these are the different ecosystems in Mexico, and the size of the circle means the threat of the problems that they are facing in all the country. With this not so good panorama, the DNA barcoding became an alternative for Mexico and Mexican research as to uncover the extremely complex biodiversity in this country, to offer a tool to taxonomists and the research activities, to offer a tool to stakeholders for the management of the biodiversity, and to offer an easy-to-use analytical tool to all government agencies dealing with biodiversity and use and management of the natural resources. The main strategy in our country was to create a network. This network is MexBol, and it is hosted by 3 main institutions. This is in the north, in the center of Mexico, and in the south of Mexico. And all of them are related with different institutions, and more or less this is the kind of relationships that we keep among all the institutions. Also, we have a web page, and you can see in this web page in English and in Spanish, you can find how many people is involved in this and how many institutions are really involved in this task. Also, we are working in a mirror with the barcode, with all the data of the barcodes. The support for MexWorld is, in the case of Mexico, the National Council of Science created a new strategy, and this new strategy was to create 20 thematic networks in the country. MexWorld is one of them, and this network received a total of this amount of money this year. It's about $250,000 after a cut of 8%. But we have no money for equipment. We have money for per diem and the web service. And also we supported members for this meeting and stays in 5 countries. So the Mexican delegates in this meeting is going to be high because of this support. The main need is for consumables, reagents, and sequencing services. And well, compared with other countries, we receive very short amount of money. This is the amount of money for 14 and 15 in these 2 years. After 10 years, where we are. We think that we are here, and this is our timeline, and we already have very important collections already sequenced. We are continuing with applications, and we are making a review of the goals of to establish new ones. In spite of the short budget, Mexico is one of the countries that more numbers of barcodes has for all groups. For example, in some groups, we are the first place. In some other groups, we are among the top 10 nations in the world in the World Systems database. And also, we generated not only barcodes, we are also working in the publications of the results that we have, and we have published new species and also new applications and new projects based on the new applications. In this case, for example, we are working with the Wildlife Project, and with this project, together with the Smithsonian Institution, we are trying to create a database for all the threatened species that are under trafficking by different kinds of persons. Also, we organized 2 international meetings in the past. The third Barcode of Life meeting was in Mexico City, and the second Fish Barcode of Life was in Chetumal City in Mexico. Also, 2 special volumes were published about the progress in Mexico. And, well, we are thinking, what is the next? Well, the number of possibilities is great. We are going to continue with the database. Also, we are going to continue describing the amazing biodiversity from this region, and we are going to start with new applications. For example, DNR barcodes in customs or food quality, and we are starting with new applications based in 2nd generation. In conclusion, Mexican researchers have made an important contribution, not only in barcoding, also to the knowledge of this megadiverse region. And we are moving in different ways to continue working in different aspects and new questions that are arising after the database we are generating and the barcodes. Thank you very much.
Same question, David? Okay. So what would an international society do for you in Mexico to help stimulate activity or leverage existing?
Well, one of the things that is we already have been working with David in this project, and we are getting new opportunities to work and also fresh funds to work to continue with the barcoding. This will give us more support with the politicians and with the stakeholders to get better funds and to continue with the applications issue. So we think that is a mutual benefit, and this is very, very important for us. So we have been very aware of this kind of collaborations. So I think it's the best way to go.
fill it in. We'll have a session about it on Friday, but it was a lot of training, software providing, technical expertise. There was a lot of back and forth with each of the countries in our project. So it goes back to some of the things that Bob were saying, organizing, training opportunities, technical exchange, that sort of thing.
Well, also we are trying to spread the barcoding and the enterprises and these barcoding projects with South America, mainly Colombia and Peru. We have been present there, and we are trying also to involve more international collaborations with them because they have also an amazing biodiversity. I think it's very, very important to focus on these countries.
Okay, excellent. Thanks very much, Marianne.
Thank you.
That's good. Great, thank you. So we are remarkably a little bit ahead of time. So what we're actually going to do is move into the first part of the session that we were otherwise going to start after the coffee break. And so Pete will lay out some of the issues, we'll have a coffee break, and then we'll get to the discussion of those issues. But just before we do that, David's very incisive and pertinent question about, so what does an international society do for national nodes is a good one. And I started to think back what we've heard so far in this session, and I've come up with a list of about 10 items already. Some of them were obviously anticipated by the Kunming Declaration, but to just give you a little bit of an idea, it gives credibility and or weight in a national system to ask for funding and to ask for other kinds of resources. The international exposure, of course, is good, and the ability to say that you're linked into an international community obviously also makes resources flow for international travel and collaborations, which of course is important. That stimulates the kind of international knowledge exchange, which is so valuable that you only get by actually coming to meetings like this and having the resources and the capacity to run meetings like this. Researcher mobility across different platforms. I think one thing, and this sort of harkens back to the comment you made before, Paul, about why is it that the physicists and astronomers have such strength as international collaborators? Part of it is because by necessity, their fields require them to share infrastructure in a way that the biological sciences traditionally hasn't required biologists to share infrastructure, at least not at the same scale. So maybe there's an opportunity here also for the society to actually really bolster integration of biological sciences from the standpoint of international activity, if there's more conspicuous joint sharing, joint development of infrastructure and access to it. Standards has been mentioned. They're both technical standards, but also standards for access and benefits sharing are very important on the international scene, and a society could support that. It seems in some cases to be a trigger for releasing fresh funds. These remarks about infrastructure funds as opposed to operating dollars being channeled into these activities is very interesting. And maybe that has something to do with international collaboration. Convincing stakeholders and politicians that this is actually a worthwhile activity. Certainly in this country, we like to see that somebody else in another jurisdiction is doing something interesting before we'll start doing it here. And you know, there's a lot of that goes on around the world where governments are under funding constraints and pressures from all sorts of different quarters of society to do something, and actually showing that you're missing out on some international activity of some importance is a way to trigger political interest in these kinds of activities. The training and technical expertise and interchange, I think, is extremely important. And then the last point I think you made, Manuel, is that participation in an international organization from your country perspective also facilitates regional activity that you wouldn't perhaps otherwise be in a position to stimulate. And that, I think you made the point very clearly, that was something that MEXBOL was in a position to do after a decade of maturation. So that's a list of about 10 or 12 things that I've already picked up that I think that we can see as being the kinds of the goods that a society could potentially deliver to the barcoding community. So with that little quick synopsis of what I heard, maybe I'll turn it over to you so that you can start rolling out the big vision. Okay, over to you.
Thanks, David. So the International Society for the Barcode of Life, really what we're trying to plan to do in this session is put our minds together to really think about what the scope of that society should be and how we could then implement that, and really working towards an end point of a consensus on scope and how we're going to get that society established. As David said, the idea is we'll sketch some ideas out here, have a coffee break, and then come back and have an open floor discussion. So breaking that up a little bit, thinking first about the functions of the society, then thinking about governance, and then thinking about the transitionary arrangements to get from where we are to where we want to be. Here are just some general reflections that have emerged from various comments along the way. There's no desire here to create a society for creating a society's sake. This is about identifying an area of need, identifying issues where there's need and responding to that, having community ownership of this society. It's an authoritative organization, but owned by the wider community. And we have to be realistic about achievements. There isn't a magic pot of money that is going to create an enormous operating machine. We have to match our needs and the available resources. And an important step here that's been mentioned several times is that both IBOL and CBOL, two very large-scale initiatives, have really shaped this field that we're working in. And this is about the community taking over some functions that have been previously provided by IBOL and CBOL. And what's very important to stress here is the endorsement and support of both IBOL and CBOL in taking this society forward. So what are the useful functions of a society? And these are the things that are extracted from the Kunming Declaration. They match well the discussion already today. So organizing these big conferences, that's a lot of work, and left to its own devices, these conferences will not necessarily continue in perpetuity. Standards is an important part of DNA barcoding, and there is clearly a lot of work to be done into the future as we move from Sanger sequencing into varying next generation technologies. Providing general resources in education and training and a central point of information to find out about opportunity. And likewise, communication and outreach, providing an effective voice for the discipline. And then thinking in terms of policy and regulation, this is a twin-sided issue. It's providing a point of contact to policymakers and regulators about DNA barcoding, but also providing advice to us in the community about how we can make our work have maximal impact in influencing policy and regulation. So one of the basic questions we'll come up with after coffee is really to tackle this. Are these the key basic functions for a start point for the society? And that will be something we throw open to the floor. In terms of how the organization is structured, we've sketched out a suggestion, which would be a relatively compact executive group. We'd have the program committee. Their main job is to look after the conferences, and then working groups along those areas that I've just outlined. The society has a membership, and it's consisting of individuals, but of course there will also be possibility for organizations to contribute to the society, and what we'd ideally like to get to is the point when organizations can help serve to sponsor the society. So again, some basic questions for us to work through. Is that governance structure appropriate? Is that something that you would view as a sensible way forward? And there's a question about the degree to which the society should consist of elected officials, move to community election of the executive and the chairs of the working groups versus self-selected committee. So that's a point for discussion. In terms of thinking about the membership, this was just an open membership. For pragmatism, we were suggesting 2-year membership, of which membership dues would just be part of the registration fee of the international conferences to make that a very easy thing to administer. Of course, need a mechanism for membership to be open to those who aren't attending the conferences. There's an immediate question there about a membership organization with dues, which is how much should that cost, how much is reasonable, and should that cost be fixed, or should there be a sliding scale depending on resource availability? So then in terms of thinking about that, that's the background of what this thing might look like. How are we actually going to get there? Our view is that it requires an interim step to get between where we are now and a functioning society. And the suggestion here is to have an interim governance council. It's got some work to do about drafting society articles, establishing it as a legal body, thinking about where a secretariat can be based, really sketching out a bit more detail on working groups, and with a primary responsibility, if elected officials is the governance model that the society will use, how do we get to the establishment and implementation of those elections, people in post? And another critical issue is 2 years away for the next conference isn't a long time for organizing a major international conference like that. And we need to very rapidly be addressing where is that next conference going to be. One suggestion that we are putting forward as a start point for discussion is that that interim governance council should consist of the authors of the Kunming Declaration, along with representatives of CBOL, IBOL, host for the next conference, and other major barcoding projects, and really throwing that open to the floor, receptive to offers of interest to serve on that council, to suggest what the membership of it should be. My personal opinion is it shouldn't be a great big huge organization. It should be relatively compact and serve its role as an interim council. We'll throw that one open to the floor. And having got an interim council in place, the issues then are running the elections, setting up those working groups, thinking about an internet presence, and as already mentioned, where the secretariat should be hosted. So I'm going to wrap up now, and when we come back after coffee, suggest this as a structure for discussion, a structure for some decision making. Firstly, thinking about the remit of the society, then how it'll function. Thirdly, thinking about some details about the cost of membership dues and things like that. And finally, looking at the host for the next conference. So I'm very happy to take a couple of quick questions now, if there's any sort of clarification, and generally encourage you to be thinking about these issues over the coffee break and to be active participants in a discussion when we return. Okay.
Any questions?
If there are no questions about this remit, and we can have this discussion after the coffee break, I think it's worth pointing out that the desire to have these presentations from some of the national initiatives showing what's been happening, what can happen, were purely illustrative based on abstract submissions for presentation in the conference. I think while we've got a few minutes and we're still thinking about activities and updates, we could also take a chance to open the floor to any exciting updates at national or other levels that are happening within the Barcode community that might be relevant to this discussion on governance and/or David's question about what could a society do to help foment activity in your nation.
working. Hello, everyone. I'm scientist from Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is a Central Asian Republic, and recently we started plant DNA barcoding project, and the project is granted by our Ministry of Science and Education, and the project is started. So I came here to actually learn barcoding right way, and will be happy to be part of larger community and to learn everything right way. And if we'll have a chance for cooperation with other research groups, we'll be very much happy, and especially for learning things like methodology and training of young scientists will be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. GD, did you want to say anything on behalf of India?
I'm from Bangladesh. I became interested in DNA barcoding in 2007 when I met David Schindel in Reading. Before that, I didn't know about this, but I was doing taxonomy. But I found that doing taxonomy, morphotaxonomy, was very lengthy and long-term procedure. And it was not possible for a developing country like Bangladesh because we didn't have expertise for identification of species. Although the country has got good and very rich biodiversity. Unfortunately, we have probably lost many of the species in the last few decades, but we don't have any list of those species which we have lost. But DNA barcoding may help us to get this species to be listed, and probably in future the nation may know which species we had in the past or we might have lost. And very recently, the NGS is showing us very good path that we can get the listing very first. And I should thank Paul Hayward because he's helping technically to get some of the insect species from Bangladesh, which I have collected from since 1 year. And he has provided some facilities to get these specimens to be sent from Bangladesh to Guelph. And they were sequenced. More than 9,000 specimens were sequenced, and 1,300 beans were found in 71 families probably. But the thing is, I think the society, if we can form a society of this community, and this society come forward to help nations like this developing country like Bangladesh to hold at least a small conference like this and get this popularized among the politicians and the decision makers who actually do not want to come forward to help doing these things like taxonomy, biodiversity, and finally DNA barcoding. So I think forming a society like this is very important, and they should come forward to help nations like Bangladesh And otherwise we might lose some of the rich biodiversity of a part of the world. We may go forward with global programs, but living part of the globe, we may not have the exact picture of the biodiversity of the total community. Thank you very much.
Siebel continues Foundation Delta. Siebel, we continue to manage a couple of the functions we did for about 8 years, but we are also running the Barcode Wildlife Project. He's working with 6 developing countries around the world with Google funding for the very specific purpose of barcoding endangered species that are at highest risk of poaching and the congeners, lookalike species around them, working all in country. All the processing is done in country, and we're building collaborations between taxonomists, museums, labs, researchers, and enforcement agencies, national police, prosecutors, magistrates, for the purpose of bringing DNA barcode evidence into courtrooms to convict poachers. And many of you are from those countries. They're Mexico, South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Nepal, and I just returned from Ecuador, which came from 6 countries. So a lot of international collaboration, and I'll mention software and creating a higher standard of data quality than the normal barcode data standard because of the advice of prosecutors, lawyers, and police, the scrutiny that barcode data will have to withstand when it comes to conviction of criminals.
Hi friends, I am GD Kherkar from India. I am representing the middle portion of the India, and our institute in last 2.5 or 3 years, we contributed almost 25,000 records for the barcode and contributing almost 12,000 species. We are having full-fledged facilities required for barcoding platforms. Whatever the processes required, we are having all facilities. Altogether, we are running 26 collaborative projects throughout the country, and almost we contributed 85% records of the whole country. Important thing is like we are having so many workshops we conducted for creating a manpower in many parts of the country. We are having, then our institute is having an open access facility, like whoever is interested to have trainings or they want to complete their projects, we are offering it this service freely to the most of the institutes in the country. Important thing about our institute is like this is the first institute in the world which is named after Paul Hubbard. So I'm representing the Paul Hubbard Center for DNA Barcoding and Biodiversity Studies. A very important thing, like we are in a short time of period, we are supporting government agencies also, food processing industries, then forest forensic services, and many related projects like the agriculture sector also we are supporting. So very short period we could able to come with good contribution to the barcoding sector. Thank you.
Okay, so Peter set the stage for what we're going to do in the second half of the workshop session. So go out, stretch your legs, get some coffee, go outside, get some humidity, come back in at 4, ready to contribute to this discussion about the society.
I was ill for the last few days until yesterday, so I was not paying much attention.
Okay, thanks everyone for returning for the second half of our session. This is the much more interactive and workshop session. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Pete, who's going to guide you through the questions. And as the commentary and discussion starts to move along, I'll step in and provide some facilitation here. But this is meant to be, you know, in a room with about 100 people, as informal a conversation as we can possibly have about the range of issues. And so we want to discuss these issues for about a half an hour or so, and then we'll take a couple of minutes to consider the two next meetings, so 17 and 19. South Africa and Argentina have expressed interest in hosting those. So we'll have those presentations, and then we'll see if we can wrap up with some discussion of some recommendations that we could take to the plenary session on Friday. So over to you.
Thanks, David. And yeah, we'll just try and move to free-flowing, open discussion. And one thing to add to that, appreciate not everybody always wants to say something at the time. We'll develop some mechanism for during the week that there's an opportunity to provide some electronic feedback after this session if you feel that there was a point that you wanted to make but didn't manage to get out in this session. So really just work through those 4 blocks, and I think the starting point for me, it's about identifying what are the absolute core functions of a society. What are the things that are the pressing need that would get the society started? Of course, things can expand in future, but it's really thinking, have we captured the key essence of need? And so to really then express this as a question, is there anything obviously missing from that set of conference organization, standards, education and training, communication and outreach, and policy regulatory?
Fundraising. Okay. People that are dedicated to working with the individuals in different countries to find out the resources available. I think that conferences and other things these days, with technology and ability to network, the need for that is much less. But funding structures and how to navigate them, having somebody who's dedicated in the society to do that for the world for this initiative, I think that would be very powerful.
Yep.
I'm going to grab this.
A point very, very well made. Does anybody have any additional comments to add to that?
I may say a few things about. I think funding is truly important, as one of the delegates from Bangladesh mentioned. That someday we also mentioned it in the declaration that developing countries maybe less funding, but obviously really rich. So if we really need a very capable treasurer to raise funding from various sources, like maybe from people like Bill Gates or Ma Ying from China. I mean, for them to give us some money so we can do something seriously in place like Bangladesh or Africa or South Africa, America. I mean, this kind of thing. So I think this is a really important point. Just a quick response.
And of course, it's very easy to lose experience of what works and what doesn't work in fundraising. I mean, David, do you have any sort of comments on that topic?
Well, my views on fundraising have been really colored by the experience over the last 2 years of working with developing countries and helping them.
Helping countries build their internal capacity. Because of Nagoya Protocol and access and benefit sharing, we came at the project not wanting to export any tissue, but to help them figure out a way to do everything locally. And Manuel's suggestion about South-South partnerships, collaborations between agencies in a country, a lot of advice helps a country find a way to build their capacity so that they can then become competitive for grants, as have been suggested. But climbing the first rungs of the ladder is a lot of advice and training and collaboration building. And I think a lot of countries would like to build their own internal capacity. They don't want to export tissues. It's going to become much more difficult. So at all steps in that development process, I think an international organization sharing experiences has a lot to offer. Notice I'm saying international organization. International society conjures up a picture. CBOL is very supportive of an international organization to take over a lot of these functions. I just don't know if it's going to wind up being called an international society.
Are there any other obvious omissions from our list?
This may be under outreach, Pete, but it's kind of more like marketing barcoding to potential users and stakeholders like CBD, CITES, FAO, national regulatory agencies. Several presentations mentioned private companies, but applications of barcoding to society, the marketplace. The taxonomic research community is doing a great job of promoting barcoding, but I think the missing piece is marketing to users.
Yeah, I did. Another possible role, maybe not right away, would be a publication, a journal publication. Just because the nature of barcoding work, you may not be doing groundbreaking science. You're just barcoding a certain taxonomic group. And that's still valuable scientific information to make public, but doesn't always warrant a publication in one of the major science journals.
Thank you. So, I'm Dr. Ravichandran Vaithilingam from India. Actually, with respect to the barcode research, it may be to the higher level we are weaving it. But in order to propagate this barcode research, we may need, after the formation of this society, to reach the grassroots level. Maybe it may be included as a curriculum in the intermediate level, school level, or in the UG level. If this, the society, if may recommend these issues to the policy makers in order to include this as a syllabus to the intermediate or college level. Because the barcode research has to go long. Since we have initiated this from the 2003, it has to be existed for the long way. So if it is certainly included in the grassroots level, it may have to have a long way and a good existence. That is my suggestions. Thank you.
So some combination there of education and outreach to sort of embed it fully.
Just to supplement what David has just now mentioned, one is actually mainstreaming into policy issues, especially 2020 AUG targets, and linking it with this societal activities could go a long way. Especially this is a national target for many of the developing nations, and as such, linking it with AUG targets and achieving the target through this goal would also help in the long way. And another thing is citizen science, linking it with citizen science and promoting this idea.
See, I'm from India. I would think that if my country is concerned, at least there are 3 agencies which would fund, and it will probably meet the demand of barcoding. So what we should recommend is that maybe in the next 2 years or next 4 years, that we will do about 5,000 species. Suppose there is a recommendation like that. With that recommendation, we can approach, because in India, the organization like Department of Biotechnology or Department of Science and Technology or Indian Council of Agriculture Research funds such efforts. But it requires some sort of a proceedings from the conference that we have given the target like that. With that proceedings, I can approach the agency and asking for the funds for the doing the barcode work. Thank you.
Yes, if people could put their hands up in as opposite corners of the room as much as possible, we can have some entertainment with David.
That's okay.
Yeah, I guess one major impact this society could have is to help providers and users and establish fair benefit sharing, because user institutions or researchers have large difficulties at the moment to record or to document benefit sharing. And we have a lot of political discussion. We have many people here from providing and user countries, but today we don't have any simplified measures, even though they are locked in the Nagoya Protocol. And this has been hampered on political level for a long, long time. If you consider how long the GTI, the Global Taxonomy Initiative, has been in place, there is no result. So one major impact could be on political level to bring this forward. It is high time, and we are really on the edge at the moment that users don't want to go into the field to collect material because it is increasingly difficult to bring it back home. And this has really impact on capacity building, training, and education on both sides, and also benefit sharing on both sides. It's one benefit that is shared among two, not among one.
I mean, what seems a good observation there is that within ourselves as a community, expressing that clearly, then linked to part of a wider union of biological sciences, where the issue of the benefits of that, the potential political voice from the union that the society would sit in would be greater than the political power of the society alone.
Yeah, I think that's exactly correct. And one of the things I didn't mention in my presentation on the International Union was the International Union's existing programs. There is a Young Scientist program which can bring young scientists together for a particular theme, conference, workshop, that sort of thing. There are also programs and a number of things that I think fit into barcoding and genomics would be suitable for a program under IUBS, perhaps a particular aspect of things of concern to the international barcoding community could be hived off as a program within IUBS. And then there are grants for conferences as well. These are intended to be mostly seed money. They're small amounts of money, but they do help a great deal. Because then with membership plus the seed money, then the credibility is further levered, further heightened in terms of soliciting other funds to do things. So the International Union does have the possibility to do that. I am sitting on a panel at the moment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, with a particular workshop that has to do with pollination and pollinators, primarily to do with agriculture and sustainable agricultural productivity. And I wonder if the IPBS might not be another avenue for exploration by perhaps the new society to explore a workshop or some sort of arrangement within the IPBS, because I believe barcoding and genomics is an extremely important part of biodiversity and understanding ecosystem services. So I think this is another direction that the International Society for the Barcode of Life, if that's what it's going to be called, something like that, would be able to go. And certainly I'm more than happy to discuss my experience with the Intergovernmental Panel. I just got back from Rome a week or so ago, after sitting on that panel. And it's coming to an end, or the pollination side of it is coming to an end. We're putting together the final document, which will be reviewed very thoroughly, we are told, by the Secretariat and by government representatives in Kuala Lumpur coming up in early 2016. So we're under the gun in trying to get that done, and that's one of the things which is occupying a great deal of my time, but I'm certainly learning a great deal from it, and I'm more than happy to share those experiences with you.
So one last one, Kevin here, and then we'll move on to the next topic. And just to reiterate that point made earlier, if there are more issues that you think haven't been covered, would encourage you to raise them afterwards or submit electronically.
Yeah, I would just like to underscore Peter's comment of membership. I actually feel that that is sort of the big difference between the existing infrastructure of CBOL compared to a new society, and that is the power of membership. You can imagine that we would have a lot of leverage with local governments and funding agencies if we could say that we are part of a society that has 5,000 members, 10,000 members, that there are actually a lot of people out there that believe in barcoding. And I think having membership in this international society is something that we really don't have in the existing infrastructure, I think.
Thank you. So that actually is a neat connection to this next block of points.
Can I just throw in just one data point for those who didn't know it? CBOL had members that were institutions. When we stopped really collecting members, we had 200 member institutions from 50 countries, and membership was just signing a piece of paper saying that they were interested in barcoding and want to be involved. So that was 200 institutions, 50 countries, just for perspective.
The problem with that is that very few of those institutions actually did. That's part of the point of getting the individuals who actually do the work.
Well, but actually what I just heard was having bigger numbers, whether they're doers or just signers, makes it look like a bigger organization.
I think there's room for both.
Yeah, I think we do need to. I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so looking then onto this next point, and if I catch the range of bullets there, there's essentially an issue here between moving as rapidly as possible to an elected set of officials who, as a community, are voted in and they get on with things, versus a sort of reflecting period about what this should look like, versus empowering the interim governance committee to do some legwork first. And it's really trying to get a sense of your views as to the importance of an elected society, an elected committee in that society versus a self-organized committee. And there's that trade-off. And then if one felt an elected society was important, how quickly the need to get there to that elected executive membership. Come on, David, run.
It could be better to have, for first 2 years, the committee should not have elections or something. No elected body. For first initial 2 or 3 years, it should function like by selection. Through selection, there should be, all functionary should be decided. And later stage, after 2 or 3 years, you can have elections. So it will be well established and would have more number of members. So it will be more legitimate to have functioning in this way. Thank you.
Any other perspectives on that issue? Bob?
Just one question, Pete. If part of our objective is to organize the biological community who's engaged in barcoding and bring them into these larger umbrella organization like IUBS that can then bring us into ICSU and help to have a stronger lobby. I guess one question that I would have for Peter Kevin is whether or not IUBS has any requirements of the societies that join it in terms of whether or not they're elected? Or is it just you form your society however you want, and once you exist, we can consider you for membership?
The IUBS is really hands-off in respect of all those things. It'll be up to the society to organize itself according to the way it wishes to organize itself. There is a need for membership, some sort of copy of statutes, rules, regulations, constitution, or whatever you want to call it, to be submitted. But the initial application for membership is just a very simple letter stating that one wants to become a member and why and what is the intention of the organization. Then, of course, a little bit of history and how it's been able to accommodate those interests. There is an official, I think, an official statement that the organization has to have been in place for 6 years, which would apply to the Barcode of Life in as much as it's been around for 10 years, but it hasn't been formally constituted for that long. So I think that would probably be overlooked or forgiven by the executive committee if application were made. That would, I'm sure, be brought forward at the meetings in Berlin. So in December, there would certainly be an answer to that question. And I can't speak for the executive committee as to what the response would be. But for me, and I think speaking for Nils as well, it would be positively entertained.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mario Thomas. On the question of elected versus self-elected, 2 points. One is self-elected. I would encourage you to move very quickly to elected. Based on the experience with similar organizations, I've seen that self-elected executives tend to stay on for a very long time, and that moving very quickly, maybe within a year to election, might be desirable. At least it should be considered. The second point on this governance is having individuals who present themselves for election may be a robust test of the desire of the community to have such a society. If you see that the interest of the community to engage in the governance of the society. So this is the second aspect that may be important for a nascent society.
Actually, I suppose that they're linked. You might as well undertake the test sooner rather than later.
Correct.
Yeah, I take it that's implicit in your remark?
That's implicit.
Okay. Well, it's now explicit. Other comments? Sure. Sorry.
The question of election, elected members, only after the membership. So first you include member, before that you form a ad hoc, or you can say working committee. That committee may look after all the work in relation with the members, the membership work. After having the membership, based on that, you can go for the election.
We wondered as an approach to do that, if the decision was to go for elections, then potentially viewing registering for this conference.
First we have to register ourselves and become a member to the society. After having the membership in large, then it may be, that's why you may have 2 to 4 years, you have a working committee. That committee may look after every work or all the works. Thank you.
when we plan to have elections, maybe we can consider voting through internet also instead of just for the people who attend the conference. Some societies do that. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. I want to interject just a couple of elements of reality. Having organized 4 of the international conferences, we had a process of bidding. There was a format for submitting a proposal so that, and in 1 year we had 9 proposals to judge the readiness and commitment of the host organization. Getting those proposals in, getting them analyzed, making a selection, that has to be completed at least 1 year before a conference. The organizing group has to have at least a year to create, to prepare for a conference like this. That means that that process of selecting the next conference has to really begin in 6 months. So how important is it that you have elected officials in place in the next 6 months, as opposed to all of the other decisions that need to be made? The goals, the activities, the milestones, the impact this organization is meant to have. That 6 months, I think, should be one of intense listening, where we have a mechanism to get ideas from the community, probably electronically, and to incorporate those into our thinking. But at the same time, you have business. We have business to conduct, creating a review process to select the host for the next conference. Now, those 2 things can go in parallel, but if you also want to spend the overhead of getting nominees, figuring out who can vote, when to vote, how many people to vote on, that's probably more than a volunteer organization can handle, of figuring out what it wants to do, figuring out where to hold its next conference, and figuring out how to elect officials. So I agree with Mario. I think a year, maybe even 2 years, maybe the first election should be at the next conference, and you have a period of run-up for nominations, rule-making. But the 2 most important things I think that are ahead of us are public comment and input from the entire community, not just people who were at the conference, on their ideas, their preference, how important is voting, how important is membership, and getting ready for the next conference.
Okay, well, on the conference part, I mean, since I've been involved in doing these similar to you, not this meeting, but other organizations, a standardized proposal bidding process with firm deadlines and budgets that result in the black for the society, not in the red, is the only way to go. And I agree, we basically need to have that. I would say that something like that, a proposal would actually have to be decided upon by the end of this calendar year. I wouldn't wait any longer than that myself. So I actually think that irrespective of what happens with the organization or society, some kind of interim program committee needs to be established to handle that process and to guide the next conference through the various steps that it will take, because it is at least a year's worth of work, as we both know. So I completely concur with you. What I'm hearing, though, is a little bit of dissonance about timelines. I was thinking about elected officials and the beginning of the development of article formation and writing out the work plans for various working groups within this next year, as opposed to taking too long. So I don't know, Mario, what you meant by doing it relatively rapidly. Was it within a year, 1 to 2 years? I mean, it's not 5 years, 1 to 2. Okay, all right. Okay, all right, less dissonance now. Thanks.
And I think just a key point with all of that is that those in that top list of the working groups, we've identified a set of issues which are our needs, and we don't want those needs to be unanswered in abeyance for a long period of time while we're going through some angst about the detail of all of that. At some point, we've got to hit the ground running and simply get on with these things.
On the executive committee, there must be regional representation. A regional representation.
Right.
There should be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and as it, just to say, as it stands, there's also an excess of Y chromosomes on the on that committee, which may be addressable.
Are you volunteering to change?
Everything in the name of science.
Right. Well, maybe we should collect some dues in your. Okay, so you want to switch to dues now? Should we move?
Okay.
Are you ready?
So we're then moving on to these sort of rather operational issues, but it's a sense of a society that has individual membership, which has individual dues, and a sense of what is a acceptable, realistic level of payment. And there's a trade-off between us wanting to resource a society to enable it to do things, and at the same time recognizing that there are constraints on individual budgets. This is as much of a how long is a piece of string question ever to put to an audience, but trying to get a sense for the ballpark figures that would be acceptable.
Since I brought up finances before, I'll comment. Has there been any analysis looking at major societies to look at what they're charging, what their governance structures are, what's necessary to come from membership versus other types of sponsorship? Has anybody done that kind of research? Or is that something we should do to justify why we should charge what we charge?
Bob, do you?
Yeah, actually, we've done a fair bit of that, looking at different dues structures, governance structures. Typically, most professional societies will have a board, an executive board. Within that board, there's typically, president-elect, a treasurer and a secretary. Then you often have members at large that are often tasked with regional representation. So that's a very common, board of directors is composed of the executive and members at large. Underneath that, you'll typically have working groups where if the society feels that there's a need for a particular working group and someone stands to be elected as chair of that working group, then they will drive it, with the membership having voluntary ability to participate on any active working group. And then that way you can kind of constitute these working groups for different purposes as needed for as long as is needed. The dues structures, you typically have a membership fee for individuals that can be as little as $35 for some small scale professional societies to sometimes 100 or more. We think that that's probably too much for many in the developing world to be able to bear, and we recognize that barcoding and most of the world's undescribed species are predominantly in the developing world. So individual membership dues would have to be kept lean. Most large international societies also have a structure for organizational memberships that is tiered based on the size of the organization. So there can be a small, medium, and large membership fee ranging from a few $100s a year to over $1,000. And then there are also membership categories for sponsors that would be industry organizations. And depending on what level those industries want to sponsor a meeting, maybe they get premier space at your annual meeting or your biennial meeting in the case of this group. If they're putting in, say, $5,000 to $10,000 a year and they get an ad in your publication. So we've looked at a lot of these different societies and how they're structured and the kinds of dues that they would bear. And typically they don't become, financially solvent overnight, but within the span of, say, 6 to 8 years, when you've brought together a large enough membership to make this really attractive for different industry sponsors. I mean, you'll notice we have a table here from Illumina. Illumina is sponsoring this meeting. They've been at the meeting in Kunming. There's an opportunity to bring together these kinds of sponsorships, but I think one of the challenges we've faced until now is we didn't really have a professional society. We can say, oh, we're going to have this meeting. You want to come? But if they know that there's an annual or a biennial meeting and a journal and different workshops and things taking place, we've done a lot of the legwork of actually organizing the customer base for some of these countries. So there's a real value for them to support the society. But that that's kind of a bit of a chicken and egg problem in terms of, yes, we've done a bit of that market analysis. Do we know exactly what the biodiversity community will bear in terms of a cost? Not necessarily, and that was one of the key things we were hoping to discuss today is, could we afford at the end of this conference to take, say, $10 per registrant and put that forth as seed money, set up a not-for-profit corporation that can have fiduciary responsibility of that little bit of seed money, plus perhaps start to see membership online so that people who aren't at this meeting can join by PayPal and have a bank account, start to build the resources that we need to host a website, to offer international travel bursaries for young students through perhaps with the help of IUBS to provide some seed money and going to other organizations. As you may hear about more in this conference, we've been fortunate to attract some funding through the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Japan Biodiversity Fund, funds to support bringing developing world scientists here to this meeting and get training. So there's a lot of things like this happening, but it hasn't actually been really coordinated under the umbrella of a professional society.
Thanks. Do you have any sort of other general comments on fee structures?
Just make one comment. One comment is the International Commission for Plant Pollinator Relationships has no dues. All one has to do is provide information as to why you want to be a member, and then provided that goes through, and no, I don't think anybody's been refused. They're considered members. Zero.
Yeah, I've been involved in 2 other startups besides Seabowl, and we decided that we didn't want to go for individual memberships because of the nature of the work. It was more institutions and initiatives. So we had a sliding scale based on size of the country or size of the organization. Dues there were as little as $1,000 a year up to, I think, the United States membership in one of them is $120,000 a year because it was, GDP rated. For the very smallest kind of organization you can imagine, you're talking about $200,000 per year budget. That's to hire one professional program manager and an assistant. You can put on a couple of workshops per year with that, maybe one major conference. You'd have to raise money for it, but just to run a bare bones skeletal organization is $200,000 a year, not counting any lawyer's fees for making it legally incorporated. So that's just a ballpark figure as a starting point.
Okay, maybe that's enough on fees for the moment. Maybe we should hear from the on the next one about the 7th conference.
Yeah, exactly. So should we actually move on to those presentations?
Yeah, I think
without
we should.
what you were thinking?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. So, I'll turn this over to you, Michelle. And Michelle, you'll have to use this handheld. The reason for the bad noise earlier was this microphone is on the frets.
Hello, everybody. I'm here to present a proposal to host the next barcoding conference in South Africa, and more specifically in the Kruger National Park. I did put some dates on there, but I mean, this is open for discussion. So I think the first question is, why would we want to host the conference in South Africa? Now, for me, it's very easy. South Africa is a wonderful country. I don't know who of you have been to South Africa, but we are friendly people. You can see my students up there always smiling. We're very diverse. We have 11 official languages. You see here people very diverse. We are often called the Rainbow Nation of Africa, and you will see and experience this if you come to South Africa. And we have lots to offer. We have 3 biodiversity hotspots in South Africa. The succulent karoo, which you can see here. If you're lucky enough to be in South Africa within the next 2 weeks, you will see the Namakwaland flowers. Beautiful, everywhere, flowers. We have the Maponduland Albany hotspot, which is on the eastern coast of South Africa, which is mainly forest areas. And then we have the Cape Floristic region, which I think most of you are familiar with. Cape Town, beautiful Cape Town mountain and the fynbos. More than 9,000 vascular plants, 67% of them endemic to the region. Furthermore, we have several national parks. The Kruger National Park, the Blyde Canyon that you can see there, the Richtersveld, which is more desert area, and the Addo Elephant Park, and many more. World Heritage Sites, we have 8 in South Africa. One of them, the famous Robben Island, the Vredendorp Dome, the Cradle of Humankind, just to name a few. Now I move on to where we propose to have the conference and the venue. I looked around at different places, and for me it's always important to keep people together so that they don't go off and do some sightseeing and don't come to the conference. So I thought the Kruger National Park is a very good location for this. This is one of the largest parks in Africa. It's about 7.5 square million square miles in the northeastern part of South Africa. I don't know where's the point. Oh, here's the pointer. There you can see the Kruger Park in green there at the top. More specifically, the venue is Kuza Rest Camp, which is here in the southern part of the park. You will see the big 5 there, and it's approximately 10 kilometers from the main gate. So people can actually stay outside the park if they want to, or inside the park. More about the rest camp. It is one of the biggest, or it is the biggest rest camp in the Kruger Park. There's swimming pools, internet, cafes, there's restaurants, there's guided bushwalks, and also trips on open vehicles. Golf course for those of you that plan to do a bit of golf, and it's actually not fenced in the golf course, so you will find some animals on the golf course. This is just the view from one of the restaurants where you see the Sabi River next to the camp. It's very easy to get to. There's flights, daily flights to the Kruger from OR Tambo International Airport, or you can choose also to fly to Nelspruit, which is the closest city, and then get a transfer from there to the Kruger. I've looked at the different prices. If you want to have a transfer from Nelspruit International Airport, it's 800 Rand, so it's about 80 Canadian dollars. If you fly directly to Sekuza Airport, it's about 15 Canadian dollars, so not too expensive. And for those that's a bit more adventurous, you can go by car. It would take you about 5 hours, but more than 5 hours to get from Johannesburg to Sekuza. But you'll see some lovely sights on your way. Just a bit about the conference center that we have at Sekuza. This is the front view of the conference center. It's a newly opened center. It opened in 2010. It can host up to 600 to 700 people or delegates, and it's walking distance from the accommodation. So the conference center is about in this area, and all these dots are the bungalows or huts, with the restaurant area on this side. So the floor layout of the center, there's basically a main auditorium that can host about 750 people, 4 breakout rooms, And then there's an additional auditorium of 100, but that can seat 180 people. There's a big foyer area where they do the teas and the lunch that can also host about 600 people. So the choice is then also to combine these 2 units here that can give you rooms of 160 people. So there's enough space to do the conference. I've looked a bit with the organizers at the Kruger National Park about cost, and they've gave me this outline of the cost, which will include all the lunches and all the dinners. It will include the gala dinner plus the first night's meet and greet function. It will also include a game drive with sundowners one evening. And in total, I mean, it includes even the conference bags. So in total, it would be about 4,900 South African rand, which is more or less 500 Canadian dollars. This will also include the venue. So it's the total cost per delegate. It will not include the accommodation though. So if we look at what we've paid this year, it would be more or less the same. So I would actually propose that we keep the student registration the same to help them to attend the meeting. And then for regular registration, just to push it a little bit up. But that will cover all the costs. The accommodation, this is what it looks like. You can have a choice from camping, bringing your own tent, a safari tent, which is quite nice. You have these bungalows, and then rondavels, as we call it in Africa. And if you feel you want to have something more luxury, you can go and stay outside the camp at the Protea Hotel, which is, I think, a 4-star hotel. And then you can have your game drive every morning coming into Sokuza. It's about 10 kilometers. Prices for the accommodation, it varies between 28 to 215 Canadian dollars. So depending on what you choose, whether you want to go into single accommodation or shared accommodation, the price varies between this. And then there's all the options. One thing that I have to add is, because it's the national park in South Africa, there's conservation fees. So for South African residents, we pay 7 Canadian dollars per day. If you're an international guest, it is 28 Canadian dollars per day. That's added to the accommodation. Now, I've talked a bit to possible sponsors. Our Department of Environmental Affairs, more specifically the biosecurity guys, they are quite interested in co-hosting the conference, but obviously they want to first hear what is the outcome of this meeting. Then the National Research Foundation, they prepared to pay for the guest speakers to get into the country. And then our alumni at the University of Johannesburg, company separations, and the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust is prepared to pay for some of these dinners or events of the conference, which possibly can drop the registration fees. And then post-conference excursions, I've chosen to just put a few down of our neighboring countries, but obviously in South Africa, we have a wide range of areas that you can go and visit. So the Vic Falls, absolutely spectacular. This is, when I visited it, I was for 2 days, I couldn't talk. It is the most beautiful place to see. So, and it's very close by, 2 hours flight. The Gorongosa rainforest, again, amazing. You have to drive there though. And then the Namibia desert, where I grew up, absolutely wonderful place to visit. You would not want to go home. And then obviously Chobe in Botswana, wonderful experience. So this is just some of the things in South Africa, and I hope I'll see you there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Michelle. And then we had also a excuse me, discussion about that had surfaced about possibly holding a conference in 2019 in Argentina. So do you want to speak to this set aside, Pablo? There's the pointer.
This one. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about the possibility of organizing the 8th International Barcode of Life Conference in Argentina in 2019. You already know all the previous international conferences have been held in the Northern Hemisphere and in Australia, but no international conference for Barcode of Life has been done in Africa and South America. Fortunately, Michelle is going to fix the problem in Africa, and we are willing to solve the problem in Latin America, in South America, I should say, because Mexico organized one conference. And we propose to organize the conference in Buenos Aires in 2019. One of the reasons is the Argentina is a national node of the IBOR project, and Argentina has been involved in the barcoding since 2004. In addition, Buenos Aires is an important capital in the world and has a lot of services and a rich offer of touristic attractions and cultural life. We are considering different places for the meeting. The first of one is our National Museum of Natural Science. This is because our museum is the main player of DNA barcoding in Argentina, and we have been organized a lot of barcode workshop and regional meetings during the last few years. One of the problems we have for an international meeting is the space. We don't have enough room space for a large meeting like the International Barcode of Life meeting. But however, we believe the museum can be still useful for pre or post-conference workshops and courses. Another possible location is a new facility, the Scientific and Technological Center, or PCT for the Spanish Polo Científico Tecnológico. This facility, here you can see the facility in an aerial view, is located in a nice place of the city. The neighborhood is called Palermo Hollywood, very cool, and is in walking distance from different tourist attractions like the zoo, the botanical garden, the planetarium, etc. It's not very close to downtown. There are about 6 kilometers from this location to downtown, but you can go very easily using the subway. The main important point for the PCT is the headquarters of the Ministry of Science, the National Research Council, and the Argentinian National Science Foundation is located here. So the place is excellent for lobbying authorities. Again, one possible problem is the space. It's probably not enough space there for organize a meeting of about 500 or 600 delegates. So we also are considering the possibility of organize the meeting in a conference center. There are several in the city. One of them, for example, is in the Sheraton Retiro. This convention center, This convention center has a lot of space and experience organizing large meetings. The problem in this case is probably the cost of hiring this place. And so we are also considering a radical different solution, which is moving the conference to the northeastern part of the country, to the Misiones province, where you can see the Iguazu Falls. Just to give us an idea of the place, in this Google map, you can see in yellow the distribution of the Atlantic forest, the original distribution of the Atlantic forest. This is one of the richest and most endangered ecosystems in South America. And here in the south, you can see the Misiones province in green. This is because there are still a lot of forest there. And in the tip of the Misiones forest here, you can find the Iguazu Falls. There is a large hotel inside the national park, the Iguazu National Park. This is another Sheraton, which an auditorium for 600 people and several additional smaller rooms for parallel sessions. And the hotel is also big, can host more than 150 delegates. Probably this location is expensive. There are an option 20 kilometers east from the park, which is in the city of Puerto Iguazu. There is another convention center here from the Merial Portal de Iguazu Hotel and Convention Center. Here the auditorium is for 750 people, and there are about 5 or 6 additional rooms in the convention center and in the hotel. Doing the meeting in Iguazu is perfect because of the high biodiversity and the landscape. Of course, there are some additional complication related with the organization, because Iguazu is 1,500 kilometers north from Buenos Aires. So you have to probably fly to Buenos Aires and then fly to Iguazu. And of course, it's not good for lobbying authorities because they are in Buenos Aires, not in Iguazu. We have several challenges on the road. I have been talking with the CONICET, is our National Research Council. I have been talking with the president of the CONICET about the possibility of supporting the conference. But for the moment, authorities are not very enthusiastic because they have had a couple of bad experiences. I mean, they spend a lot of money and the impact of other conferences wasn't very high. So we have to work trying to convince the importance of organize this meeting in Argentina. Other organizations we contacted say it's still too early to make commitments about putting money in the organization. Some of them work with a frame of 3 years in advance, not 4 years. So other challenge is that current authorities are going to change. Neither the Ministry of Science nor the president of CONICET will be in charge in 2019. So we have to decide to whom approach and negotiate, the current authorities or the new ones. In fact, we are voting a new government during this year. So, and finally, you know, the situation of the economy of my country is not a very good one right now. We have a lot of inflation and some restriction for using foreign currencies. So we have to monitor the situation before taking the final decision about offering Argentina as a place for the 8th International Barcode of Life Conference. And because of these elements, I should say this history will continue, and by 2017, we should take an educated decision about how to move forward or stop. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. It appears that you have to have really spectacular waterfalls close by, or at least 1,500 kilometers near, in order to be able to host one of these conferences. I know. I know. We should, yeah, we should pick some biodiversity poor place where there'd be no interest in going outside and looking at things. Like, you did pretty well with your backyard, Paul. No. Okay, so we are just now a little bit over time, and I just want to explain what we've been discussing here as some potential next steps during the course of this week. We had originally intended, through a set of 4 draft recommendations that we would present to you today, to then have a discussion and possible voting procedure on Friday's plenary. We might still get to that point. The 4 motions that we wanted to introduce here for discussion were really just about making sure that we're getting things moved along with respect to this organization or society or whatever it happens to be. Let me just explain briefly what these are and what we're going to do with them. The first thing was basically just to get some basic agreement on whether or not we could, as a group at this conference, say, yeah, let's constitute an interim governance council that would take some responsibility for making sure that things still progressed over the next coming months and coming years. And Pete had already discussed the composition of that governing council as being the authors of the Kunming Declaration, plus some key representatives of some key organizations, all to be determined, but that was the original intention. So that was our first thinking, that was our first recommendation, so that somebody would be there to keep the conversation going. The second was, if there's going to be a secretariat and a home base for it, where would we start off? Would we actually start off with Guelph at Bio? So that was another point of discussion. We wanted to make a recommendation and motion so that people could consider it and think it through and decide yay or nay at the plenary. The third thing is, we also wanted to have a discussion here today, and it was meant to get all your feedback on these points, is whether or not we actually got the working groups right, whether or not that's too few, whether or not they're improper working groups to begin with, and we've gotten some feedback about that. So we're going to make a recommendation around working group formation and start to try to find some people to populate those groups. And then the fourth thing was to talk about where the 7th meeting would be, in light of what David had said previously and what I had echoed, was we need a proposal soon, but it also has to be a proposal process that has some integrity to it, so that we really scrutinize exactly what the costs and trade-offs would be, and that it's an open process. Michelle has kindly stepped forward and made that presentation, but I don't think that should be a conclusion that it's necessarily going to be in South Africa. I think it needs to be an open and transparent process for the society. But nevertheless, we were going to say, look, a proposal process would have to be implemented. We'd need to have some guidelines developed. Some or other of us would undertake to develop those proposal guidelines, having done these sorts of things before, and then put a closing date on it. I had suggested by the end of this calendar year, just thinking that it's good to get this done sooner rather than later. Those were the 4 recommendations that we were going to carry forward to the plenary, but I think we've heard enough in this workshop today to realize that each one of those 4 recommendations and some other things that have come up really require us to go back and revise these during the course of the week so that we will better reflect what's happened in this couple of hours that we spent together here. And we would then be able to take revised motions for considerations to the plenary on Friday. So what we're proposing to do, and I hope this meets with general acceptance, is to actually start a discussion thread on Connect. And we could probably start that as early as today. I don't see why not. And to actually to put the motions up there, and the revised motions, I should say, and then offer people the entire rest of the week to provide their feedback written, or they can read it and come and talk to us in the meeting, so that we will continue this conversation throughout the course of the week. Realizing that there have been almost about 100 people in this room, not quite so many at this point in time, but that's a small fraction of the total number of conference participants. I will check in with the organizers of this conference to see if we can get an email sent out to every registrant at this conference, alerting them to the fact that this is happening and that they should go to Connect and check in and look at the discussion and see what's happening. That way, everybody who potentially will be at the plenary on Friday will have notification as early as hopefully tomorrow that this is what's happening, and so that they can be included in the conversation. So on that basis, then we would get their feedback, and on Friday, we would actually undertake to present some motions at the plenary meeting to get some further feedback, to make some decisions about how we're going to keep the momentum from this meeting moving forward for the next couple of years, and to evolve the organization or society, such as it may be, and actually set up some structures and some expectations about what will happen over the coming months and coming years. Does that sound like a plan? Is it a good plan? Would you like to make an amendment? David?
Yeah, I don't know how you plan on revising these 4 recommendations, but the thing that ran through them that jarred me a little was a combination of wanting to make some decisions going forward, but also containing some decisions. So I would be most comfortable if you laid out exactly as you said, a call for comments and structure it according to a couple of different themes. Working groups, what kind of body,
okay.
Maybe 4 issues, maybe those are the right issues. And set a window of a comment period, 60 days to comment on this, and a structure to process those comments. Once those comments are in, then we'd be in a position, the group would be in a position to make proposals. People can feedback on it, have yay or nay if you want, but a series of a series of milestones. Comment period, absorbing that, digesting it, reflecting back some concrete proposals, and having, as you recommended, a firm milestone of when are we going to issue the call for proposals to the conference, when are we going to decide venue.
Pete?
I think just the one trick for us to get right here is the things that we can achieve this week. If there are those things we can identify, it's really important to catch the momentum that's here, because with the best will in the world, when people go away after a conference, maintaining that momentum, maintaining all of that community feedback is much harder. So it's the trick. We're not trying to rush things, but at the same time trying to capture the fact that we've got a lot of good minds here and to achieve as much as possible during this week.
Yeah, so maybe we should ask in the comments that we open up or the discussion that we open up this week, if people think that we should proceed with a decision on some or all of it.
I think the composition of an interim group, put a proposal out, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
and the timeline and the subjects we want discussion on.
Right, okay. Any other observations or input? Okay, well then, seeing none, then watch your email for an invitation to come to connect on the discussion thread, and we will post something as quickly as we possibly can. And so in conclusion, I'd like to thank everybody, Bob Dejoux, Peter, and Pete, and everybody else who presented, Michelle, so on and so forth. So thanks very much, and we have now, I think, a short break, and then the reception starts at 6:30, is that correct? Yeah, okay. That we would actually do the